Should there be caste-based reservations for Miss India? Now, this might seem like a joke to you, but the current leader of opposition, Rahul Gandhi, seemed pretty serious about it when he complained in a public forum how there were no Dalits, tribal or OBC women among previous Miss Indias. In his recent US trip, when he was asked what is the common policy theme between his Congress party and a hardline Hindutva party like Shiv Sena UBT and regional rivals like AAP and Trinamool Congress, and by the way, this is part of the same clip that went viral when he was forced to admit that the India Alliance and India are literally the same thing. Watch what he says is the common thing they all agree upon.
We agree on a lot. We agree that the Constitution of India should be defended. Most of us agree on the idea of the caste census. We agree that two business people, namely Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani, shouldn't run every single business in India. So for you to say that we don't agree, I think is inaccurate.
See, protecting the Constitution or being against Adani and Ambani aren't really concrete policy ideas, but the caste census is. And so if this is the only policy that all these opposition parties seem to agree on, well, then the government should take notice. David, after all, only needed a small stone to bring down Goliath. And it seems from his statements that Rahul Gandhi is convinced that this stone for him is going to be the caste census. And so you may ridicule him, you may have names for him, you may share memes of him, but make no mistake, Rahul Gandhi has managed to bring back caste politics into the mainstream and national discourse. So much so that BJP's ideological body, the RSS, is now forced to change its tune on this. From campaigning against caste-based politics so as to project the united Hindutva ideology, it is now saying, sure, we are okay to have a caste census. So whether you like it or not, caste-based reservation seems likely to dominate Indian politics in the coming years, which will inevitably impact the country's economic prospects. Hello and welcome to The Bond Economist, your one-stop destination for professional advice on economics and the political economy. My name is Auradeep Nandi, and today we uncover why caste-based politics has found a new leash of life in national politics, how it has already started impacting policymaking, and what are the risks to the economy associated with it. As always, if you like what you see, please hit like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support me, the super thanks button is below. First things first, let's talk politics. So the whole noise around the caste census actually started from end 2023, when the Nitish Kumar government in Bihar, which was then a part of the opposition alliance, went ahead with the Bihar caste census, the first done in decades. And at the time, many commentators felt that this was going to be some sort of Brahmastra to checkmate the BJP. At the time, Nitish Kumar, the architect of this, probably himself didn't know that he was going to flip sides to join the BJP. But somehow, even though he crossed over, his agenda didn't. And to the national audience, the brand of caste-based activism, the slogan "Jitni Abadi Utni Haq," got appropriated by Rahul Gandhi and the Congress party. A few months back, Rahul Gandhi raised the issue of caste census in the parliament, complaining that this is a government of elites.
इसमें ये जो बजट का जो हलवा है सर, ये बट रहा है, और इस फोटो में सर मुझे एक ओबीसी अफसर नहीं दिख रहा, एक आदिवासी अफसर नहीं दिख रहा, एक दलित अफसर नहीं दिख रहा है मुझे। ये हो क्या रहा है सर? सर देश का हलवा बट रहा है सर, और इसमें 73% का एक है ही नहीं सर।
And soon the debate sunk to the childish level of Congress and BJP leaders challenging each other on what their castes were, but until then it was still rhetoric, just words. And then it happened, when caste politics jumped from sloganeering to policy making. UPSC had brought out an advertisement for lateral entry into some 45 government posts at pretty senior levels, and some calling for sector-specific expertise. By the way, this is not the first time that private sector people have been invited into government positions. In fact, it regularly happens at the highest of levels under both Congress and BJP governments. Posts like a chief economic advisor, RBI governor, SEBI members, heads of planning commission, which we now know as Niti Aayog, have all been experts in the past, chosen from outside the bureaucracy. After all, our ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is probably the most celebrated of lateral entrants, who was essentially an academic parachuted into very senior government roles. So was Raghuram Rajan. First, he was chief economic advisor and then RBI governor. Interestingly, both of them were products of Congress's administration. But even at much lower rungs, it is an open secret that the big four consultancies run very lucrative government advisory arms where they literally embed their consultants into government departments at central and state levels. These guys help make investment pitches, run these invest in so-and-so state campaigns, help draft regulations, do presentations for chief ministers, advice on how to streamline red tape. So they may not be part of the official bureaucracy, but they are essentially doing the work of bureaucrats. And to some extent, it is important to seek out private sector expertise and infuse fresh blood to help make public services more professional. After all, in many ways, our bureaucracy is frozen in time from colonial days, be it in the way it recruits, in the way it operates, the lack of meaningful appraisals, and the privilege that it carries. And I'm guessing it was civil service reform that the government had in mind when they decided to let in more lateral entrants on a temporary basis. But then politics took over. Suddenly you had Rahul Gandhi calling this an attack on Dalits, OBCs and Adivasis. The government's own allies, JDU and the Lok Janshakti Party Ramvilas, spoke out against the policy. And it's actually interesting to see that even within the NDA, it's the two parties from Bihar who protested this move based on caste. But down south, Chandrababu Naidu's TDP party from Andhra Pradesh supported it, saying that, look, it will enhance the quality of governance and delivery of services. And this kind of tells you the difference in state leaderships and what matters most for the voters in the two states. And so once, its own allies started speaking out against it, just like that, the government rolled back the notification. And caste politics claimed its first policy victim. On the face of it, the government's U-turn may not seem like a big game changer. After all, what's the big deal with a few dozen posts in a system where people are entering by the thousands every year? But it does send two very important signals. One, that the government may not be as strong as it earlier was. I mean, if you can't defend a simple administrative notification, then how powerful are you really? And two, caste is proving to be a big chink in the BJP's armor. But that begs the question, how did caste become such a big deal in national politics? Now, you could argue that the BJP is prioritizing it because the Congress is forcing it to. But then the question is, why is it that Congress is getting political mileage out of this issue? Is it because caste discrimination has increased lately? Now, this is a tempting premise. After all, recent statistics do show that caste-based crimes have increased. So obviously things are not okay. In fact, only recently there was news on how over 40 houses in a Dalit-dominated locality had been burnt down in Bihar. And if you read about caste-based crimes, it's not just the gore of the crime that is horrific. It's also how small the triggers can be. Victims have been beaten or murdered because they decided to sport a moustache in their village, or ride a horse during a marriage, or drink from the wrong pot of water, or marry into a supposedly wrong caste. In fact, the issue that one human being can do this to another based on some hypothetical sense of superiority kind of tells you the extent of dehumanization that caste creates in people when you stop considering other people as people. But one can also argue that all these atrocities have been going on for a long time. And there have actually been large caste-based agitations in the past. So why is this suddenly chiming with the public now in 2024? Well, one theory is that the caste issue may actually be a red herring. The real underlying issue could be the worrying state of employment in our country. Half of Indians in the working age population are actually out of the labor force. They are not even searching for work. So it could be working age women who are forced to stay at home. It could be people preparing endlessly for competitive exams, or those who have just given up on searching for jobs. Now, for those who are in the workforce, a majority of them are self-employed. So think of the neighborhood chaat or momo wala, or casually employed. So the helper at the stand, or the delivery agent getting those momos to various apartments. This means that only a little over 20% of the workforce is actually in regular jobs. And guess what? Despite all what the government has been trying to do, this already small share of regularized workers is shrinking even further. And by the way, we are terming these as regular jobs, but it also includes a lot of low quality jobs, by which I mean jobs where people are just chronically underemployed. Like, say, the security person at the mall peeking into thousands of bags every day, or liftmen pushing buttons all day while flicking through reels. India's problem isn't unemployment, it is underemployment. Hence, there is a ginormous premium attached to the handful of high quality jobs in the economy. And at the peak of this small molehill are a few government jobs. So much is the lack of skills among applicants and the lack of good jobs in the economy that even sweeping a sarkari floor or passing a sarkari file from one office to the other feels like a privilege, leading to thousands and thousands of applicants overqualified on paper, with postgraduates and PhDs lining up for jobs like sweeper or peon in government offices. And it is this frustration that has led to a shriller conversation around caste-based privileges, a way to beat the very long queue. We see it play out in Maharashtra politics, for instance, with Marathas asking for reservations at the cost of OBCs. Now, the Supreme Court has a 50% cap on quotas, which means that the fight is now on to elbow out others for a small and limited number of good quality colleges, good quality universities, and good quality jobs. So, what is the opposition proposing? Opposition leaders will tell you, we are going to get the caste census done. Great. But what happens after the caste census? Well, no one is ready to spell it out, but it doesn't need a genius to figure that out. More reservations. In fact, one of the agenda points in the Congress manifesto for the general elections was to scrap the Supreme Court mandated 50% limit on reservations for the underprivileged castes. In fact, one of the well-known proponents of the caste census, Yogendra Yadav, has publicly said that after the census is done, he would like to see reservations also being rolled out in the private sector. And I'm not entirely sure that Rahul Gandhi, in all his wisdom, has actually thought this through. First, if the outcome of the caste census is that SC, ST, Dalit, OBCs are still among the most disadvantaged economically, then should it not lead to a reassessment of whether reservations are indeed working or not? Because we've now had reservations for many decades. And we also, in fact, have this creamy layer distinction for OBCs. So basically, someone who's from an affluent and well-to-do background, even though they may be from a backward caste, well, they have to give up their privileges in the favor of poorer people in their community. The reality on ground, though, could be very different. After all, in the case of Pooja Khetkar, who, if you remember, was this IS officer trainee who was throwing her weight around until the media and the establishment looked into her case and found that among her many inconsistencies, not only did she allegedly pass herself off as disabled, but she was also availing the OBC quota, despite her family owning luxury cars, palatial houses, and acres of land. So surely if reserving seats in reputed government colleges, in civil services, in government jobs is actually contributing to the upliftment of the weaker castes in the society, it should also show up in the data. And if it doesn't, then shouldn't there be a conversation on why reservations aren't working? Also, remember, SC, ST, backward castes are not one monolithic block. Even within these castes, there are hierarchies. So, if the caste census comes and tells us that, look, one backward caste is doing better than the other, logically, you should reduce reservations for that caste and increase it for the ones that need them more. This is very much in line with what the Supreme Court ruled in August, that states could do sub-classifications among SCs and STs to identify those who need quotas more than others. In practice, rolling this out is going to be tricky because reservation-related protests very often become violent in India, and communities can get very protective of their privileges, regardless of what is good for the broader society. So it's not surprising that soon after the Supreme Court judgment, the central government had to step in to clarify that there would be no creamy layer classification among SCs and STs. So are we ready to have the tougher conversations that will emerge out of the caste census? Or is it just going to be an indirect way to keep increasing the amount of overall reservations? The problem with awarding more reservations is that it lulls politicians into thinking that it is the silver bullet to uplift the underprivileged. But it's not. Because understand what you're doing. You're not figuring out a way to create more high quality jobs, to make the pie big enough to employ our nearly 100 crore strong working age population. Instead, you are obsessing over how to split maybe a couple of crores of sarkari jobs with tiny knives, saying, okay, you get 1 peanut, you get 2 peanuts, vote for us, and after elections, we'll get you 3 peanuts. And the conversation ends there. It's not about how to solve inequality at the grassroots, where backward castes may be struggling to get quality education, struggling to get access to public resources, where their property rights, their right to live, their self-esteem may be getting violated. It's not about how a Dalit who is in the private sector company and could be getting discriminated against can fight back against it. Like in the US, a number of tech companies have been accused and taken to court because their Indian employees have shamelessly discriminated against other Indians from underprivileged castes. You are not worried about strengthening institutions, making the law actually work for them. But guess what? If you actually strengthen the quality of local administration, lay down the law in its full strictness, no one will dare to discriminate against anyone. And, SC, ST, OBCs, they won't need reservations. They are bright enough to get those jobs themselves. But instead, by glorifying reservations as the one and only bullet to solve caste discrimination, politicians have conveniently blocked out addressing the real reason why reservations exist in the first place. And this is hurting India. As much as we like to think that Viksit Bharat is just round the corner, the fact is that India's per capita income is less than $3,000. For China, an upper middle income country, it's over $13,000. So forget becoming a developed country. Even within middle income countries, we have light years to go before moving from lower middle income to an upper middle income country. And a very, very big part of the way that transition happens is by unlocking the potential of human capital. Be it China, be it Korea, be it other Asian economies. Yes, they've had investments. Yes, they've had innovation. But they've also had a healthy, educated, productive, and meritocratic workforce. By forcing 50% reservations into 60 or 70%, or by forcing private companies to lower their standards to accommodate caste equations in their hiring, we are creating inefficient entities that will struggle to compete with the outside world on merit. Similarly, by burning down houses of Dalits in some village, denying them quality education and healthcare, discriminating against them, we are also destroying our human capital, preventing people from reaching their real potential because of some outdated idea of where they are supposed to belong according to their caste. Because true upliftment is to prevent the modern day Dronacharya from forcing Eklavya to chop off his thumb. It's not about giving the disabled Eklavya reservations in the archery team. For more such insights, like, share, and subscribe to The Bond Economist.